Well, hello everyone. We are live here on the Dr. Boz show, adjusting a couple of these things. Welcome to Tuesday night. It is the real live deal. We are live and in person. We are totally talking about something really fun that I have learned over the last 5 weeks, but really drove it home over the last 2 weeks. And it has been a huge amount of chatter on the Neurons page on Facebook about what we learned inside that course. And I have a bunch of people asking questions. So I'm going to use some case studies to teach you what I learned and what many of the people learned while they were in that Dr. Boz show. So give me a thumbs up if you can hear and see me, because that's always not a guarantee here on the show. Welcome to the traditions of the Dr. Boz show. We're going to start with, before I get into all that other stuff, I'm going to be real and check my numbers. We are looking to unpack several of your questions tonight, so please give a thought to any questions as I start to explain this that you want to hear answered. And I have some great helpers in the background helping select the questions that look like they would be answered, that they match with this conversation. And we will get as many of them answered as possible. I hope that the cases I've selected will do some of the teaching. Again, they really taught me. So as I look at my glucose ketones, I am going to say that, yeah, this fast has been not my favorite fast. So 2.3 on the ketones, 83 on my blood sugar. And I have been just struggling. I really want to eat. I'm hungry. And it's not been the perfect fast for me, meaning I had a little bite of something last night, which I'll tell you about in a little bit. But before we get into that, there are a couple of announcements I have. I have a really fun thing that I want to share that I am definitely, I really want this guy to win. He is one of my favorite people that I've met since being in Florida. He leads the children's home that has been a big part of my feeling really like I'm part of the state of Florida. I think you become a part of a community when you are serving in a community. And this children's home is the best example about how to help kids that are in a stage of life where mom and dad couldn't example for them what a family looks like. And their children's home does that. When I went to Honduras this summer and took my sons, they translated for me while we served a medical mission trip. And the place we stayed was this same children's home organization in Honduras. So we got to stay at an orphanage there. We were safe. This gentleman named Matt was a big part of helping me get back to something that I've really missed, which is the service work with my kids. I will tell you, raising children without entitlement in this generation is not easy, but I think acts of service where they get to see behind the closed doors of what mom does for a living. You can't exactly do that in a clinic here in the Western world, but Matt helped me do that with my kids, which is a super gift. So, as many of you know, I've been sprinting for the last 5 weeks, getting ready for a course, delivering a 21-day metabolic challenge, lifting 200 plus students through a metabolic kick that really fascinated me, but definitely wore me out. And I have been looking forward to my rejuvenation, which is a small lecture to help out Matt and his team for helping the Florida faith leaders. So I think my team has this link. Actually, I just put it in there too. In the show notes that I have donated my time to be part of this, but I'm also attending as an attendee for the whole time because last year it was one of the best places where I got to fill up my spirit and really reset for what do I want, how do I want to lead in the next year. So Matt and his organization were a big part of my welcoming to Florida. There is a very special event that I will be leading on Friday, which has to do with like a coffee with Dr. Boz. So if there's only 8 seats that are allowed to do that, and I think only 3 of them are taken. So if you sign up and you choose to have coffee with me on Friday, It is in Orlando. It's a short notice. They were going to close sales last week, but the hurricane changed a lot of what all of us did here in Florida. So they have extended the time a little bit longer. And again, if you're anywhere near Florida and you're looking for just a great way to learn about how do you as a mom or a dad or a leader of a company, how do you reset? This workshop is one of my favorites. So one of the lectures I'm looking forward to is the leader of the Ritz-Carlton is going to speak about his journey through leading a company into such an amazing legend in our communities. Anyway, so I will be there. If you want a little discount, type in Dr. Boz. I think that gets you, I can't remember if it's 10% or 15% off of the ticket prices. And if you want to have coffee with me, there's a few seats left open. All that money does go towards putting on this conference and really nurturing the leaders that serve places like the Children's Home. So a couple of other announcements. We are done with our course. And we had a few of you that I know are listening right now because I see your names, that at one point you had subscribed for our newsletter and then you must have unsubscribed because I can no longer send you an email. So I need you to go to the bottom of this page and resubscribe. Put your email in there. And when I go to send an email to you, it's bouncing back saying they have unsubscribed from your channel. And you were part of my course. You were part of this 21-day course. So you have unsubscribed, I don't know, in recent days, apparently. I do want to take just a minute that we have had another banner week for selling this keto combo. Again, when it runs out, it runs out for good. It's the last time I'll be able to do this. So anybody who buys 4 bags or more, we take 25% off. We are trying to get rid of this product because whatever I have on the shelves left on January 1st, I have to destroy, and that's a sin because it's a great product. But that's what happens when you do not promote the sales of your products enough. So lesson learned. Anyway, I do want to take one moment to give a review for, I think this one is Keto workbook. Again, we lifted a lot of these folks across several thresholds in the last 21-day challenge, and several of you bought the workbook for the first time and were able to say, yes, these are the step-by-step instructions. Meg M wrote in and said, if you're serious, this is a great first step. It is what I have all of my patients buy. If you're going to try and see me in the clinic and you don't have a workbook and you don't have the workbook somewhat filled out, you probably aren't going to get into the clinic because you absolutely have to be helping me keep track of what you're doing. Again, the last review on this was in late September. Since October has started here in Florida, we are all cleaning up from a hurricane, but I will read you this quick. I purchased this book back when Dr. Boz released it. I couldn't wait as I read her first book and enjoyed the journey of Dr. Boz and Grandma Rose. Both sad and happy reading. Recently, our house burned down, leaving us with only 99% of our belongings. As we work to rebuild, I live temporarily, setting for the next year. And I knew I had to replace this book along with Dr. Boz's workbook, which I had on my finger to buy, waiting every day, waiting. I will purchase any way you can when we finally move to our home. Thank you again, Dr. Boz, your follower, Natalie. So Natalie, I truly, my heart goes out to destruction in life. Florida has given me a very appropriate level of fear for hurricanes and evacuating. And we packed up all of our life and put it into a car and drove the cars. Actually, we packed up our pictures and a few pieces of clothing, stuffed the cars full, drove them to a parking garage that was above the water, and then we drove away. And if the hurricane had hit where it was supposed to hit, our house would have been 15 foot underwater, 10 foot underwater. So that real fear of, dang, resetting completely. I can't truly imagine, but my heart goes out to you for that. And I would love to do what I can to help you build back to a better metabolism. While I'm on the show tonight, I am going to be drinking some ketones. Like I said, I'm hungry, and I know that this fuel I'm about to take will help I also know that the reason I drink ketones isn't because I need them right now. I have 2.3 ketones or whatever it was. I have a pretty good Dr. Boz ratio, but the ketones definitely have their the products that are out there have. Oopsie daisy! I dropped my cover in my glass. Um, the ketones that are out there on the market don't all raise your ketones. I'm trying to show you that when you drink them, you should be able to measure your ketones 30 minutes later, and they should be higher. So let's see if I can raise ketones that are already pretty high. But the product that I'm drinking tonight definitely is it's our keto. I think this one's raspberry, actually. I'll taste it. Yes, this is raspberry. It's my favorite one. It's one of my favorite ones. All right, so we do have several of these good questions that many of you wrote in about. Again, lots of you talked about why is it that what we saw in the class happened. So I'm going to do my best to explain to you what happened. I have several examples here. I'll show you what was going on inside a classroom. Again, this was quite the experiment for me, is lifting people through a strong surge of their metabolism and doing it over a very intense period of time, 3 weeks, to lift them from a place where what I would expect I would have seen a change in a patient. It would have taken a year to get really the kind of metabolic bursts that I saw in some of my stalled patients. But we did it in 3 weeks, and it certainly took some of the, I think this is why this is happening, kind of the mystery of what happens in clinical medicine when you're seeing one patient at a time, trying to collect kind of a Rolodex of outcomes saying, this is the pattern I'm seeing, this is the pattern. And you put 200 plus people in a program together, you have them all hooked up to metrics to study their glucose and ketones on a day-to-day basis. And then you ask them to do certain things as a group. And wow, my mind was blown on how impressive that, first of all, the learning curve was for me, that, this is what I've been seeing. This is what is happening. And I have some theories to try and answer questions about what happened. So let me start by showing you a couple of great examples, and I'm going to use one of the dashboards that we used within that that the course, and we're going to use a couple of the students that have given permission for me to share their numbers for teachable moments. So here we go. Let's go to this scene. Hold on, I gotta look at the right number. Oh, this one, I think. Yes, that's the right one. Okay, so here is a dashboard, what I would say. And when we were in the course started on September 12th. So here is the September 11th, the day before the course started. Now, the great part about synchronizing data with patients in the 21st century is we can retrograde look at some numbers. So I've selected a 28-day range from today, so it's looking backwards for 28 days. And even though this student wasn't in the course at this time, her data synchronized with our dashboard. So on September 11th, her glucose was 98 and ketones were 1.2. And you can see that on the first day of the course, her sugar was still about 107. We asked students to take this first thing in the morning, really looking at, we want to see how high their cortisol goes in the morning. What does it raise your glucose? We want to see what your ketone production is doing during that cortisol rise in the morning, during that glucose surge in the morning. And again, this is first thing in the morning, like we labeled it TOT, tested on toilet. So the next day, 13th, is 109. The course is just starting at this point, really kind of getting everybody synchronized. 14th is when we put in the first, we actually synchronized everybody's data. This is where I want you to pay attention. So on September 17th, it was the first day, and some people started a little bit early. So this is the 16th. It might not be synchronizing just right because that surge in ketones happened when this patient, and you're going to see two others, did a sardine challenge. So they were told that, yep, we are following your numbers every day. We are looking at your metabolism, and starting at noon on Sunday, even if you're a faster, somebody who is routinely fasting, we want you to only have the food of sardines for the next 72 hours. So from noon on Sunday to noon on Wednesday, if you get hungry, I don't care if it's 3 o'clock in the morning or if it's middle of the afternoon, you're allowed to eat as many sardines as you want to. And we're going to see what your glucose does and your ketones do. So you can see that his ketones shot up to 2.4 and his glucose down to 83 there. Again, about the place it had been. You'll notice that glucose went to 86. I think this is the fast was broken on the 21st. So I'm not sure if he did the challenge all the way. Um, I think this one, let's make sure I know who I'm talking about here. Hold on one second. Let's try to not show their names on live television. One second while I look to see. Okay, yeah. Okay, they did do this right. I know who this is. Okay, I'm gonna try again here. So yes, that sardine challenge started on the 16th. It burst those ketones up to 2.4, and I know this person quite well. That's not normal for her ketones to be that high. And then her glucose again 86 and ketones down to 1. And this was a day after she had broke the fast for her sardines. When you come the following week, when she starts this will be what we call a water fast. So we have them surge, watch what their glucose does, watch what their ketones do during only a sardine fast. We saw a remarkable surge in people's ketones rising. You can see her glucose didn't spike. It really stayed stable. I would actually check her glucose meter. It's a pretty well, actually, it's pretty good variability. When it got over to her water fast only, where she ate nothing, check this out. She started that on the 25th. So here is her ketones at 0.4, and this is again the morning of eating nothing. So then she gets to 24 hours in, her sugars have dropped a little bit. Again, first thing in the morning, ketones at 0.5. And then by the end of the second day, she's got a glucose of 96, ketones of 1. And by the end of the sardine fast or the water fast, she got a ketone of 2.1 and glucose of 83. So isn't it remarkable how much higher her ketones went when she was only using sardines as her food and not fasting. We're gonna talk about this. I want to talk about 2 more examples before I do that, though. So let's go to this example. Here's another place where, again, on the 19th is a Sunday. So this is the morning of the 19th. Glucose of 79 and ketones of 1.6, and glucose of 92, ketones of 1.6. And now we are, I think, a day into only eating sardines. Glucose down to 78, ketones 2.7. Let me just blow it up a little bit further. And then glucose 88, ketones 2.4. So look at that surge in the glucose or in the ketones, and rather flat line for her glucoses. Now, this patient, I will tell you, is a lot. So this one was her glucose of 66, ketones of 4.2. That is so remarkable. She really did see this change here of her ketones during her sardine fast. And then when she went to do her water fast, she got a response of her ketones that she has never seen with a water fast in the past. So I want you to just take notice. This is actually a younger patient. She is not insulin resistant, but she is rather sluggish on how she was producing ketones. So she got a little bit of a rise when she did her sardine challenge, but when she did her sardine challenge and then went to do a water fast, just had a incredible response of her ketones, and then was really good at eating. She broke her fast and her sugar went way up and her ketones went down, which is what's supposed to happen. Very funny. I love you, girl. Here's one more example. Again, here's the 18th. This is before the sardine fast started. So blood sugar 110, and then eating only sardines. So a little bit of a improvement in the glucose there first thing in the morning. But now a day into eating ketones and really seeing those ketones start to rise. Now the ketones up to 3.2, glucose down to 74. This is really typical of what happened again and again and again. I mean, I have 200 examples of these. So I tried to pick, this is the classic example of what most people with insulin resistance saw. They saw this rise in ketones, they saw a drop in their blood sugar. And then after they broke their fast, meaning that fasting is supposed to be nothing, but they had only sardines. So when they went back to eating normal food, and mind you, they're in a ketogenic class, so they're trying to eat keto. Blood sugar up to 100, glucose went down to 0.6, blood sugar 103, glucose down to 0.4. And now this is what happened during his water fast. So glucose of 94, ketones of 0.7, glucose of 81, ketones 0.2. It's been 2 days since he's eaten, right? The 28th. Oh no, that's when he broke his fast. That's Wednesday, right before he broke his fast. And so by the end, he had not eaten for 72 hours and his ketones went up to 2 and his glucose went down to 81. So again, this was after the day after breaking his fast, glucose now down to a really good level, even though he ate the day before, and ketones down to 0.7. And then this was the last time he checked before we stopped synchronizing. So the point I'm trying to really demonstrate, let's see if I can, I think I can draw on this. If I do this, let's take that away and go. Let's go here and see if I can draw on this. So I just want to just make sure that you see what I'm trying to demonstrate here is that on the 19th, this rise in ketones was when he was only eating sardines. This rise in ketones is when he was eating nothing. And this is how high it got by the end of 72 hours of eating nothing. This is when he was eating those fishies. Okay. The glucose and its response, let's just change the color there. The glucose and its response did go down during that sardine fast. The glucose also went down during his water fast. And this pattern of a spike in glucose or a spike in ketones and a slight reduction in glucose really is a priming of what we saw almost universally throughout these patients that were insulin resistant. In fact, I would tease them that if they were insulin resistant, it is very likely that they would see a better response in their sardine challenge than what they were getting in their water fast. That if they wanted their water fast to look better, they should prime their water fast with a sardine fast the week before. Like if they did 3 weeks of 72-hour sardine fast and then they did a water fast, a 72-hour water fast. So that's not like just a few hours without. It's incredible what we were seeing inside their metabolism. I want to see if I can get to this other place that I really think I can. It's under files. Oh, goody. I think it's here. Oh, that's exactly what I wanted to happen. Okay, so looking at this is again those two examples. Here is where that that sardine to the 20 right in here. That's where the sardines were for this one. So here's our fish. Okay, notice that this incredible spike in the glucose, and when you watch, or in the ketones, and as the ketones during the water fast were happening, I mean, it mimics what was happening inside that system on the water fast. Again, a pretty stable glucose in both of those cases. The first thing I actually found in one of the students was that their meter needed to be calibrated. Their glucose meter was reading too stable for the dynamic changes that were seen in their ketones. In fact, I've really been impressed with how the accuracy of comparing the Foracare versus the Keto Mojo, and how that blood sugar is actually more accurate with the Keto Mojo than it was the Foracare. And when I compared it with the local lab, I'm finding that it's not just a data point that they're using for marketing, that the Keto Mojo has a higher accuracy for matching glucoses um, than the keto than the Foracare did. So wait, there's one more. I just want to make sure that you see this, because this will really come home when I do this. So here again is this 18 is where that's where the sardine chat. So this is really where she started eating sardines. Is right here. Like, this one is not sardines. This one's sardines. This is sardines, and this is sardines. And this one is where she did the water fast only. Okay, this student right here is not insulin resistant. She had sardines, and she sees this rise in her ketones, with a pretty stable glucose. But when she went with water fast only, her ketones shot way up, and again, pretty easy control of her blood glucoses, not not dropping too much. So when I look at the pattern, let's see if I can summarize this, because I'm doing a lot of talking without saying what was going on in my mind. Okay, so when I look at the, dozens of over 200 people who did this sardine challenge, and said, okay, when I knew their backstory and I was looking at their data, you could see when they were insulin resistant. And those are the people that write in and say, Doc, my ketones are 0.4. My ketones are 0.5. I did your keto thing. I had a 40-pound weight loss at first, and now I'm flatlined. I can't seem to get it to go. And I've started fasting. I can't make it past 48 hours. I feel like doo-doo. I started drinking ketones because I'm falling off the wagon. My body hasn't seen a ketone in, a month. And truly, taking the ketones in, do not let your cells go without the ketones if you're in a rut. But I am going to push you to say, if you want the best hack, and I had a little bit of confidence, probably 3 dozen patients that clearly they were in a rut. I've said, I need you to only eat sardines for 3 days. And they would poo-poo and say, I don't want to do this. I don't want to eat it. I don't like sardines. I'm like, just shut up. Do this for 3 days. You can do anything for 3 days. And by golly, you would see those ketones rise. And in many cases, their glucose would drop better than it drops during a water fast. So I'm like, can that be? Can that be? And I'm here to tell you that after this 200 student database infusion into my brain, I am telling you this is what happens when they're insulin resistant. Let me get back. So here's how this works. In an insulin resistant patient, they have a huge storage bank of their glycogen that is filling their liver and it's filling their muscles. And when they first go on that ketogenic diet, they do lower those carbohydrates, which lowers their insulin, and that will release a crop of glycogen that has been under storage, because you cannot release glycogen in a high insulin state. So they drop their insulin only a little bit. Their level of insulin would still be really high to my body, or somebody that has not been overweight for a few years. But in their system, they went from an insane amount of insulin to just under an insane amount of insulin. And when they dropped that insulin by an inch, they dropped it by some, they were able to free the storage of glycogen for that layer of glycogen. It also allowed for the fat storage to release. It allowed for an uncoupling of their mitochondria, where the body was like, boy, we are having a whole lot less food come in. We are having a whole lot less glucose come in. We need to just release a bunch of energy to keep this human alive. And so the mitochondria actually uncoupled. We talked about that in the course. I'm not going to go into that tonight. And they lose a bunch of weight. And they say, oh my gosh, doc, I can eat like this forever. And I'm like, okay, keep going. When you flatline, come back and we'll adjust again. But they get really comfortable. They're like, okay, I can do this. I can get down to my high school weight. I can do this keto thing forever. And they still have pretty long hours of eating during the day. Maybe they're even at 3 meals a day instead of the 2 meals that I recommend. But whatever gets them to where they're at. God bless them. They lose a bunch of weight. And then this thing happens where the production of ketones is so stinking rare. I hear people talking about cycling in and out of ketosis. I'm like, well, guess what? Your body naturally is going to get to the place where you burn glucose for what's available in your body. That it doesn't like to hang out in this ketogenic state. Once your body adapts to it, your system is going to live with this newer, lowered level of insulin that ha- do what you want with it. It's not healthy yet, but it's healthier than you used to be. So then they start doing things like, well, this person in my support group fasts for 72 hours, so I'm just going to start fasting. And although that isn't a bad idea, fasting for 72 hours takes some skills. They have to be able to push off the temptation. They got to be able to not bite their spouse's head off. There's just some skills that come along with not eating food, not comforting yourself with food. So maybe they make it 36 hours, and it just is barely enough to lower their glucose and maybe open up a little wink of ketosis, and then their body closes again. And so they keep trying. And in their world, fasting for 36 hours is amazing. They've never done that before. Doc, I need to be rewarded. I really have fasted I went without food from sundown to sunup for a whole stinking day. I should be losing weight. And unfortunately, it's just not enough to lower their insulin again. If I could push them to 72 hours of fasting and I could get them to do it 8 consecutive weeks in a row, all things would be better. But most human beings can't do that. I mean, life gets in the way, hurricanes show up, it just stress happens. So I started saying, well, here's another way to just let's push your metabolism for 3 days. And that is this 72-hour sardine challenge where no other food and I'm really careful to say, look, I'm not asking you to put 90% salad with a little sprinkle of sardines. I'm asking you to eat the sardines right out of the can. I want you to eat sardines only for 72 hours. And what I would see when I was first doing this is this remarkable production of ketones. And it's almost like it would prime their liver to produce ketones at a higher rate. Kind of like if they were only going to eat MCT oil for probably 3 days, but who wants to do that? No, you should eat the sardines. The sardines are better. The sardines are more sustainable. Eat the sardines. So as you watch this happen time and time again, you start to see that, wow, I've not seen some of these insulin resistant patients be able to get their blood sugars down into the 80s. They're hanging out at 100, 98, 104, 97, 104. And then they do a sardine challenge and their glucose is dropped to about an 80. Now, it's not a 65, which when their blood sugars get down to 65, I am really confident that they are in gluconeogenesis. They've, emptied out their liver of stored glycogen. They've emptied out the stored glycogen in their muscle cells, and they are really holding that blood sugar at 65 because they are having to make the blood make glucose, gluconeogenesis. It is a different metabolic state. Their insulins are really dropped during that time. And of course, if I could get an insulin resistant patient to do that routinely, we would fix all these problems. But some of my insulin resistant patients were fasting like 5 days to get their blood sugars out of the 70s and into the 60s. And I'm telling you, that's not healthy. I have a whole lecture about why that's not healthy. I'm not going to go into that tonight. 72 hours is you're going to get the highest return of your improvement of growth hormone, of norepinephrine, and a surge, a plunge of really stimulating that metabolism. So they weren't getting there in 72 hours. I mean, spending 5 days without eating, that's just that you're not going to find a lot of people that do that. I started feeding them the sardine challenge, and now they're routinely throughout the practice. And you can see this in the healthy patient versus the one that's not insulin resistant versus the one that is. So let me see if I can show you. I think I need to push erase on this first before I do that. So I'm going to just show you this again. Oopsie, push erase. Okay, good. Let's do this one again. Okay, so this is one of the examples. Yeah, this is one of the examples of the healthy person, the person who doesn't have insulin resistance. Oh, oopsie, wrong little one. I'm supposed to do it this way. No wonder it didn't fit. So again, here is what happened. Here, oh, come on. Here is Oh, come on. Don't be that way. Oh, I got to do this guy? I don't know. Oh, I know what I'm doing wrong. Okay. Idiot. Okay. I'm like pushing the eraser and wondering why it won't write. That's the place where she had the sardines. And you'll see that her ketones went up. Her blood sugar didn't change much. So she really infused a bunch of fat fat and protein that she could turn ketones into um, she could turn fat into ketones. She could use that and really kept her blood sugar stable. When she went with water only, this is the H2O diet, her ketones went way up. And again, she lowered her glucose a little bit. That's what it looks like when they are not insulin resistant. So let me get out of here and go back to my other slide here. And I think it is. Okay, so this is the example of what I typically saw in. Let me go to this one, make sure see which one of these. Yeah, the glucose going high, and it's this one that I like the best. Yeah, this one right here. Oopsie daisy. Oh, good grief. This is what I wanted. So here is the example where these ketones go really high during a sardine fast, and they improve during a water fast, but not as much as when as what happened during the sardine fast. This is what it looks like to be insulin resistant. So because their insulin went from super high to lesser high, it's going to take them 5 days to start emptying glycogen, or especially fat levels that allow them to get this kind of production of ketones out of their liver. It's just a huge amount of time. But when you are insulin resistant and you have the consumption of food, so that alone produces some insulin. And insulin resistant patients, it produces more than you think it does, but you are consuming the fat that can be turned into ketones. You will see it go into that liver and you will produce an abundant amount of ketones. When you are water fasting only and your insulin resistance, the fat that you're trying to turn into ketones is locked. It's locked inside your fat cells. And you have to lower the insulin enough to burn up the glucose. So that's why it takes so long for that glucose to really lower in an insulin resistant patient. And it's only after that glucose lowers that you can start to see their ketones produce. So this metabolic flexibility, the part that should flip back and forth within 20 hours of going without food in a healthy person. But in an insulin resistant patient, it's delayed like 48, 72, and even further before we can see that flux of finally burning up enough glucose that their fat cells will allow the energy resource to be present to their mitochondria in their liver. And they can now feel the surge of, oh, that's what it feels like to fast. These people talk about how wonderful it feels to fast, to have ketones of 3.0, or just the euphoria that comes with fasting. And they don't get to see that till the fourth or fifth day, unless they've primed their bodies with a sardine fast. So today at my support group, I was trying to explain this. I didn't have slides like this to show them. And so I'm trying to explain what is the right thing to do for somebody who's insulin resistant. And I said, I want you to I would love you to try to fast, try to get to 36 hours every week of fasting. But the minute you start to need food, that you spend at least the rest of that 72 hours eating sardines, eating something that's high in fat, that's giving your liver the opportunity to now turn fuel into ketones. And that's where they get this abundant production of ketones. In fact, I told the lady at my support group today that I would tell you not to fast at all for at least the next 3 weeks. And instead of having a fast every week like we try to do at our support group, I would push you to have only sardines from noon on Sunday to noon on Wednesdays, and really not break that rule. Start with that. And in those insulin resistant patients, we saw this in the group. We saw it really trickle over into people that used to be insulin resistant. I'm one of those that used to be insulin resistant. And when you eat only fat, not only is the volume of food less when you're only eating sardines, I had nobody in the whole class overdose on sardines today or this past group. But what I really was proud of is how many insulin resistant patients said, "Oh, I feel so good. I finally understand why these knuckleheads go without food for 2 days if you could feel like this, 24 to 40 hours in." And they weren't feeling that. They were feeling terrible. They were feeling with, their blood pressure drops. We tell them just to, increase their electrolytes. But what they're really missing is their liver isn't producing the ketones like the rest of us. Their liver isn't uncoupling the mitochondria and really surging the energy to come out of storage to be in abundance, and in surplus, which is what happens during our fasting seasons. Yeah, I had this great podcast today. It doesn't air for a few weeks, but it was with Ben Azadi, who's like the keto camp guy. And I think I got to spend like an hour and a half talking about mitochondria and uncoupling mitochondria. And it doesn't air for a few weeks, but if you don't follow Keto Camp, you might want to take a listen to him. He's got some really good, he's kind of sciencey like me, but has some really good life lessons that are coming along with lots of keto lessons. And I got to explain to him today what it means for mitochondria to be uncoupled, why you would want your body to waste energy. And when we're looking at insulin resistant patients, we need them to do this naughty thing of your body, and that is to waste energy. That your body will work really hard to conserve energy, to not waste energy. But there is this magic zone when you deny it food. And in insulin resistant patients, that means you deny it carbs while feeding it a high amount of protein and fat. And there's nothing like a can of sardines to get this perfectly prescribed correctly. And as you uncouple the energy, as you uncouple those mitochondria and you waste energy, yes, you're going to lose weight, but more importantly, you're going to fuel your body with this abundant energy. And when I look at my chronic insulin resistant patients, the ones who've just had too many years of high insulin, it is just such a joy to see them so filled with energy that their own body made. That it wasn't, the supplements. It wasn't, a gastric bypass. It was, no, you really pushed your mitochondria to do what they're designed to do. But because of your years of insulin, you've just had a heck of a time getting there. Okay, so I really want to get to your questions. I probably took a little too long to answer all those, so forgive me. Let's go over and get to good questions here. Might have to go a little after because I see there are some really good questions here. All right, let's start with Peter. So, does the sardine fast still let you hit autophagy? The same as a clean fast? That is a really good question. So that autophagy is really a signal of your body using these proteins that are junk. They're wasted. They're not functional. They're not proper. They're kind of pushed off to the trash. And someday in the future, your body was going to either figure out how to repurpose them or clean them up later. So autophagy is a function of a metabolic stress. So I wouldn't, and this is again a guess because nobody can, do a lab that specifically says autophagy. In an insulin resistant patient, getting autophagy to start is difficult. So when I look at a Dr. Boz ratio that gets, south of 30, like in that 30s, 20s, even teens, I'm really confident that they have pushed themselves to an autophagy. You can see that system do this when you do a sardine fast. Like I looked probably at 75 charts, and they were Dr. Boz ratios in the teens, in the teens, in the teens, in the teens, and they were all found during the sardine fast. So I contend that if you're able to surge those ketones and lower that glucose enough to really see that shift in a Dr. Boz ratio, that shift into those lower Dr. Boz ratios really is what we think is sparking the cleanup process. It's a sign of danger. Okay, so your body was designed to fuel from the food that you eat. Calories in, calories out, or what happens when you are glucose filled. glucose fueled, excuse me. When your body is properly conserving all the energy that you eat, you burn the energy that you eat. That's what a coupled mitochondria looks like. An uncoupled one is what happens when the Dr. Boz ratio lowers, and it is dangerous. You're wasting energy. I was explaining this to Ben today, or we were talking about this in his your ancestors that went without food. The first day without food, everybody's a little grumpy. But the second or third day without food, you need to be the guy with the energy. You need to have this strange phenomenon take over your body where you burst out a bunch of ketones. You're filled with energy. So you can chase down the saber-toothed tiger and kill him and have lunch. And if you're the body that doesn't have any extra energy, that didn't have the wasted energy, you couldn't run fast enough to kill to do the hunter gatherer. Well, then you died. So when you watch this season of the body really plunging to produce excess energy, it's in the hope that there's opportunity for fuel or for food, to satisfy our needs. And if the saber-tooth tiger never comes along, if the saber-tooth tiger comes along, you need to be able to get him and kill him. That opportunity is only going to be met if your body is prepared with this strange phenomenon of wasting energy. And so, in a state of ketosis where that Dr. Boz ratio is lowered, it's a danger signal saying, yep, we are using our storage. I don't care. We got to get through this famine. We are using our storage. And that signal is what is coupled with the triggering of repurposing proteins that are no longer useful. So, can I guarantee that the sardine fast makes somebody's autophagy ignite? If you get a huge surge in your ketones and that glucose lowers, I would say pushing that Dr. Boz ratio to that, that alert sign to your body is going to trigger autophagy. Again, I can't be 100% confident. That's just my expert opinion based on what I see in patients and what I see to happen. Okay, let's keep going. You have so many good questions here. We're going to be here all night. Okay, so Ruth says, do you still hit norepinephrine and high HGH when doing a sardine fast for 72 hours? I would contend that, again, this is related to stress. You're stressing your system. So it's that dramatic shift in the ketones going up and the glucose going down. I would push people to say, if you really want the best autophagy, oopsie, wrong one. If you want the best autophagy, if you want the best norepinephrine and growth hormone, guaranteed, a keto adapted system with a water fast only will get you there. What I hate to see is the people with insulin resistance trying so darn hard to get their bodies to do what their body could have done 30 years ago. But unfortunately, they have just bathed their bodies in this slimy dictator insulin. And now to turn that stuff back on it just takes so much effort. And they push and they try and they're like, doc, I'm doing what you say, but by 72 hours, I am just beat. I'm tired. They don't feel good. Nobody feels great during the whole 72-hour fast, but it should be just a chapter of crabbiness, not a whole bunch of crabbiness that happens. Like they just don't feel well. So when I look, is norepinephrine surging? Is growth hormone surging? I like to see that within that 48 hours, they are really starting to see a rise in ketones and a drop in blood sugar. And by the 72 hours, they've got a blood sugar in the 60s. And then the ketones are they're really good. They're really dramatically better than at the beginning. So that's the best guarantee that I can see on the evidence of norepinephrine, growth hormone, and even autophagy. But I don't think it's none when you're doing a sardine challenge. It's all about what is the stress that you have put on the system to use this alternate fuel. And by gosh, it's quite the hack for my insulin resistant patients who it's hard to watch them just suffer week after week after week, knowing that it was just too many years of insulin that they have had to live through. And because of that, they're suffering. It's a lot. That's a really good question, Ruth. Good job. All right. Lisa writes in and says, okay, there a need to decrease food portions of my Dr. Boz ratio is around 20. Okay. There a need to decrease food portions of my Dr. Boz ratio is around 20 in the morning. Weight is stalled. History of Hashimoto's, prediabetes, high blood pressure, all much better now. Okay, so her doctor. Okay, guys, I think you need to like clarify this question. There, decrease of food portions of my doctor. So if your Dr. Boz ratio is 20 in the morning, you're doing great. Keep it up. If your weight has stalled, yeah, I need more data. I need more data. Okay. Dr. Boz, I have had great success with your course and have now lost 100 pounds. I have also had success recently with a 2-week water fast only. But someone said you recommended against that long of a fast. Oh, Matthew, this is such a good question. So let me go back to this. So Matthew, if you bought the Consistently Keto course, there is a bonus lecture that is an hour long that talks about the science of fasting and what happens to growth hormone, norepinephrine, glucose, ketones, Dr. Boz ratios. I use that same content in this recent course that I just put on for the 21-day metabolic kick. And actually, I was shocked at how many people hadn't seen that because I'm like, God, hasn't everybody that's on my channel seen that? It's one of my best lectures. Like, I love showing you what happens with the surge in production of norepinephrine in growth hormone and in a fat adapted person, which 100-pound weight loss is definitely got you fat adapted. The highest return of your investment of that fasting is that burst in growth hormone, is that burst in norepinephrine. And that is exponentially increasing over a 72-hour fast. Once they get beyond the 72 hours, there might be a slight increase in the norepinephrine or maybe a 10% more increase in the growth hormone. But there's also quite the risk of a catabolic breakdown of that muscle tissue being used as nutrition. Now, it gets worse every day that you go beyond the 72 hours. So it's not like I'm at 74 hours, I have to stop. It's not quite that critical, not that sharp. But it's that extended fast, getting into that fourth and fifth day of fasting, it starts to compromise what is the risk versus benefit. And not only have I really landed solidly that 72-hour fasting it's a great surge of your system. It's a really good challenge of your spiritual growth because you're going to need some help from the Lord somewhere in there because it's a lot of 72, a lot of time in 72 hours when you're not eating. But mainly it's that the risk, you want to see that growth hormone rise. You want to see that norepinephrine rise, but you do not want to see the body's resources tapping into a breakdown of muscle tissue. And the longer that goes, the less production you're getting out of that surge of that growth hormone and norepinephrine, and the more likely it is that they're going to be breaking down muscle tissue. It's for that reason that I also like rhythms that are repeatable. A pattern of doing something. So 3 days during the week where they fast, and then they don't feast for 4 days. They have an eating window that is very stable in the 4 days that they eat. And when I look at somebody like the gal who says I'm having trouble losing weight, I would say pushing her to 8 weeks of 72-hour fasting, and then it's during those other 4 days that I need to say, yes, your eating window is only 3 hours or 4 hours, whatever she's at. And it's a stable number and it is not gluttonous. It's not like they're just eating to gobble everything up in those 4 hours. When food turns into this intense source of pleasure, you lost. That's not what we're doing here. We're trying to find a rhythm that's stable. So it's for the breakdown of muscle tissue that I worry about when especially the older folks get, the easier it is to flip that switch and break down that muscle tissue. But it's rare in the first 72 hours. So pushing them to 72 hours, pushing them to 72 hours, pushing them to 72 hours. And then that other critical part of the equation is on the 4 other days they're eating, it is an eating window that is only this many hours, whatever they were at before they started. And it is during sunlight hours. It's not from 7 o'clock till midnight. It is during the high hours of sunlight where you get the space for your metabolism to really do the reset it should be doing when you sleep in your sleep. Okay. Um, so yeah, there's a couple other ones. Okay, we'll do two more and then I'll check my numbers. We'll call it good. Um, so Matthew, awesome question. Jamie, if you have a problem with digesting fat because your pancreas, what can you do? Well, pancreatic enzymes are a prescribable option. They are very expensive. I've had people who thought they couldn't absorb fat. So be sure when you're using this pancreatic um, excuse, and I mean that like some people say, oh, I get diarrhea every time I eat fat. I'm like, yep, that's because your gut's not healthy enough yet. It takes time to get you there. So if you truly have a pancreatic issue, first of all, let me tell you what happens with people without a pancreatic enzymes. And I use this to confirm the diagnosis. When I get a patient who's been sent to me by another doctor, they've been with another doctor and oh, I don't make pancreatic enzymes. I clarify to say, well, tell me what happens when you have a stool after you've had fat. And the people with true pancreatic insufficiency, not only do they talk about how their stools float, they're very full of fat, so they float above the water, but it is the most foul smelling stool ever. Like they've learned you don't pass gas in public. You sure as hell don't go to the bathroom in public because you will clear out not only the men's or women's bathroom, whatever you're in, but the other ventilation in the other room too. It is the most foul smelling stools ever. So if that's not you, then you're making some pancreatic enzymes because there is something to people without pancreatic enzymes that is unique, and that's the smell of their stools are terrible. All right. So check that history. If you do have pancreatic enzymes, you got to replace them, or you'll die. You can't absorb one of the some of the life sustaining nutrients, essential nutrients or fats, and without them, you'll die. Okay, let's go to the other final question. Here we go. Alex, are you recommending we do sardines 1 week and then fasting the next week? I think that's a good way to do it. Somebody said, how many cans? And what about cow fat fast? Yeah, I'm telling you, the problem with a cow fat fast goal is it tastes too good. The other major part about a sardine fast is nobody overdoses on sardines. So food consumption in excess is part of what has happened to the American diet that's gone haywire. Is we reward with food. We love food, and we have got all these amazing culinary benefits that make it easy to love food. Cows are part of that. I'm a beef farmer's daughter. I'm a hog farmer's daughter. I love it. I think it's great. But I'm telling you, if you want the kind of outcomes that we found in this class, there was something dramatic about, yeah, nobody overdosed. Nobody had 3,000 calories full of sardines in a day. I mean, at the end of the sardine challenge, I said, I want to know how many cans of sardines you consumed every day. I never saw a number north of 5. I think there was 1 or 2 5 cans in a day that I saw. And it wasn't for all 3 days they ate 5 cans. It was the first day. The second day it was like 3, then it was 2. It's just the level of satisfaction from food is easy to find when you quit putting so much variability on your tongue. And if you've had food addiction, yeah, it's a great way to work on that. All right. I am going to check my numbers one more time. We did go over a little bit. I apologize for that, but all those were some good questions. Let's see. I must give a lot of credit to a gentleman named John Ford. John Ford was I see this gal wrote in saying something about doing sardines for longer. He did the 72-hour sardine fast and said, well, gosh, if it works good for 3 days, let me do it for a month. And then he kept track of his numbers and he sent them to me. And John Ford, I have just taught so many people through your example. I just need to say thank you. All right. So I really do would love to see some of you at the Faith Leadership Summit that I advertised earlier. I'm going to check my numbers here to see if they got better. I do want to show you that at the end of this, there'll be an end screen for the 8 lessons that you need to know to succeed on the ketogenic diet. So if you're new to this and you're just trying to figure out how to do a ketogenic diet, we're going to put one of my favorite videos at the end of this that will link you to that. So let's see how I did. Yes, this is, ketones up 3.3. Ha! And glucose is down. That's what a supplement is supposed to do. And again, I don't have to take a supplement. I'm showing you there are supplements that raise ketones and there's others that don't. So know what you're doing. All right. See you next week, everybody.